Influence, and we're going to talk about the power of the group. Basically, when we're in a large group, we kind of act differently than we do when we're individuals. I'll give you the first example, which is that of group polarization. Now, the idea of group polarization is the fact that if you put someone in a group, you'll find that the opinion of the group is more extreme later on. So, for example, if from a class of people, I pick out the 5 people who are of one kind of opinion, for example, on social welfare or healthcare, of that kind of opinion, and I put them in a group to discuss that idea. Later on, when I kind of pull them back out, we'll find that their opinion has been more extreme. It's going to move into a more extreme position. Again, the same happens on the other side too. If these are people against healthcare or against social welfare, and you put them in a group, then you can see that their opinion also moves to be more extreme. So basically, when you put a group of like-minded people in a group, they're going to become more extreme. They're going to become more polar, more to the edge, going that way. So what exactly happens when there is a group? Why do they become more polarized? Well, again, there's 2 kind of influences involved. The first one is the informational influence. When people are in the same group and they have similar ideas, you'd imagine they're going to share more of this information. So the part, first of all, is that by getting more information, our opinion is going to more likely change, right? If you're a group of people who like healthcare, other people say, well, here's another reason that you should like healthcare. Here's another reason I think. And they'll give you more and more evidence and arguments. In that case, the information helps you change your mind, makes you more extreme. The second one is the normative influence. You want to be liked by the group, right? And so in this case, under the normative influence, you will find that the people can kind of figure out where the group stands, and they move the position to be more closer to the group in order for the group to like them more, right? So they want to be liked by the group, and one way to do that is to adopt the group's position. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to pick up how other people think about the issue, so everyone makes the same error in overestimating the support of the group on that certain issue. So again, the 2 reasons we see are the informational, right? People get more information about that topic. And the second one is there's the norm. People want to match the norm of the group, the normative influence, and they kind of miscalculate and they become more extreme in order to be accepted by the group. So that's a quick example of what group polarization looks like. And so the other thing I want to talk about groups is that sometimes you often think that there's safety in numbers. If a group is trying to decide something, more or less likely because there's more people involved, more heads, more thinkers, they're going to come up with a better solution. And most of the time, they probably do. However, Janice Irving came up with this idea of groupthink. Sometimes he found that groups actually make bad decisions. Groups of smart, intelligent, well-researched people come up with awful choices. And he termed this groupthink, that is the idea that sometimes in groups, there's a strong pressure to conform with what you think the leader of the group wants, to the point that we do things that purposely silent opposition. I'll give you a couple examples of what groupthink looks like. Most of you are probably too young or not even born when this occurred. This is the Challenger explosion, and this happened during, I think, under Kennedy's watch, when they were trying to shoot a spaceship into the Earth, into space. And unfortunately, after a couple of seconds after liftoff, there was a great tragedy, and the shuttle exploded, killing all the astronauts on top of it. Now, years after they were looking at why this event occurred, they found that there was one thing that caused this tragedy to occur. It's called the O-ring. And basically, O-ring is this little plastic disc that people use within the screws of it to hold certain parts tight. And they found that the O-ring, when they experienced extreme temperature changes between really cold and then really hot, became really brittle and kind of disintegrated. Right? The problem is that the problem with this O-ring is that the issue with the O-rings with the temperature was actually kind of well known in NASA at the time. NASA being the space agency. They knew that the O-ring had to be tested more in order for it to be safe for space travel. However, there was strong pressure for the group to move forward with the space launching because everyone was talking about it, was really excited, and they kind of delayed the launch a couple of times already. And so individual actors at the group meeting table decided not to bring up this issue with the O-ring. So the kind of things that need to happen for groupthink to occur is that there has to be kind of a charismatic leader. The group has to be very coherent. The group has to be very adhesive. They're like kind of very together, unified, right? With a very unified group, everyone is on board on the same direction. And so individual members of this group would have the perception that they need to do everything they can to please the group leader and move forth the group agenda, right? So we find that they actually do things. For example, they suppress dissent. They could feel that people who disagree with them, they don't like them and exclude them. Number two is that they suppress evidence that say otherwise. So even if they have evidence that the O-rings weren't working, they would purposely not bring that up, right? They would dismay that. And thirdly, they would keep their opinions silent to themselves and not think of alternatives. And they'll have this kind of illusion of invincibility. Everyone in the group thinks that they're invincible and that their plan is going to succeed. There's other examples of groupthink at work. I could name two more examples. The first one is the Cuban Bay of Pigs invasion, where, again, President Kennedy was interested in whether they should invade Cuba for a revolution. And they thought that they would send people into Cuba and they'll be greeted as liberators, and that the local army would be too weak to defend itself. And so when President Kennedy was having these roundtables with the army generals and the political leaders about whether it's a good idea to move forth, groupthink occurred. It's a very coherent group, cohesive. They stick together. They had a common goal of invading Cuba. They had a feeling of invincibility. They feel like that Cuba can't defend itself. Moreover, they have a very dark view of, they had a really moralistic view, judgment on Cuba, saying that Cuba is evil, Cuba is immoral. That's the Fidel Castro times again. And so what happened was a fiasco in that the Navy purposely sent fewer soldiers than they needed to. They discovered that there was a strong resistance from the civilians, and the Bay of Pigs fiasco occurred because a lot of good people died that day, and it was due to some really poor choices. People knew about the possibility that there might be an uprising, but they decided to ignore that kind of information. It didn't even get brought to the table to Kennedy's attention, right? So there's a strong norm for people to agree with each other. They feel that the need to agree is so strong, they would remove any dissenting information. This situation might sound similar to you because it's a very similar occurrence to what happened in the 2003 Iraq invasion under